everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me is my dear friend, Anne Sinclair. And thank you so much for joining us in this other episode of the program.
Thank you so
As
much for having me.
yes, and as we know, Anne, we are in a state that we are pressed upon to carefully build. This is an egoic construct, of course, but carefully build personas, our masks, and we are really pressed to present ourselves as the best we can be. And most often, of course, those are reflection of a idealized egoic construct of how we would like to be, not necessarily what we are. And in doing so, we are most often unprepared to deal with things such as failure, mistakes, issues that we're going through. And because we're unprepared, and we end up utilizing defense escape mechanism to defend, to protect the illusion of who we are instead of really confronting those inner conflicts that we carry. So I feel that the feelings of shame and guilt are just an enormous part of the current society context in which we're immersed. And I love that we're here, and because we're going to center our discussion today as an invitation for all of us to understand how to be open and to confront, to face our inner conflicts. And we need to do this by shifting our focus instead of defending an image. And I put my hand in front of me because I always think of a mask, right? Instead of focusing on creating, defend the mask, but to really focusing on embarking this journey of self awareness and to have the will to become the better person, right? The better Marcia, the better, and the better you. But before we address that, Anne, I would like to introduce the program to those who may have not heard it before. Thank you for being here. But if this is the first time you're watching this podcast, please note that our program, Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis. And we're here, this is our mission, to offer a safe space to confront, compare, correlate, and most important, expand our spirituality concepts now from this psychological lens so that we can access insights, tips, or even advice to help you and I lead a better life. Please note, before we continue, our program is sponsored by the United States Spiritist Federation, the TV Mansão do Caminho, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. Before we start, I would like to say if you haven't already done so, please hit subscribe so you can get notifications of our next weekly episodes. And if you'd like to know more, there's a lot of information, a lot of resources at spiritist.us. And finally, if you have any questions, any feedback, any, I don't know, critique, whatever, please write them down on the chat window, and I'd love to hear from you and address, if not now, at a later episode. So, Anne, we meet again, and I know that you recognize that we talked about different aspects of guilt, and boy, this is not an easy topic, right? But I appreciate you taking this journey with me as we break down the topic layer by layer. And today's layer is shame. Can you start perhaps in by defining shame to us?
Yeah, sure. So let's read it because make it easier. Just a general definition of shame. which is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness or perception of wrong or foolish behavior or improper or immoral behavior. So basically, it's talking about our pain and our humiliation
Mhm.
related to behaviors that are perceived as not being okay. Let's put it like that.
Yes.
And it's interesting because when I was reading here, Joanna de Angelis, she's always so inclusive. So she
Yeah.
says all of us
Yeah. Yeah.
will suffer with shame and guilt at some point in our lives, somewhere along the line. So the topic is not for others, but it's for each one of us. And I really love it that we're all focusing on this journey of self-discovery, of really trying to come to understand ourselves and to accept ourselves.
Mhm.
Because as well as Rwanda says, just taking it as a point of because shame can be quite a painful topic. Let's just
Mhm.
put it at this point that at this point we are at the most evolved part of our evolution that we've ever been. We are the best version of ourselves that we've ever been.
That's a
We're
very
not
good point,
perfect.
right? Yeah, don't be ashamed for being who you are because, newsflash, this is it. This is the best you can be. And I think, as I was mentioning before, this desire, right, to create an illusion of who we want to be. And of course, that who we want to be is really a benchmark given to us by society, right?
Mhm.
And society is given those benchmarks based largely on mythological views of the perfect man. And I'm talking mythological because I'm referencing books, novels, movies, series, all the plethora of channels of information that we get from everybody, including social media, how we always presenting ourselves, and that's quite mythological because it's not real, right? It's really archetypical as they're becoming images of you and I, and if we're not there, we are perhaps failing,
Mm,
and is that failure to not be the failure to be what we're not, which is the authentic self, by the way. If the failure of uh, not to be what we're not, really to be who we are, is led or absorbed in our inner selves, right? Our psyche is of shame, like
mm,
I am not. But that's my, let's say, public persona. I created this persona, and now I have to be, and I spent all my time, right, and creating um, an illusion, but also protecting that illusion. And
mm,
when that illusion, for those instances when we have a major fallout, is shattered, then we often go to defense mechanism, right? Be it justifications, rationalizations, and so many other defense mechanisms. But the to back to you with the shame is, based on the definition, it's a very painful
mm.
feeling, right?
Yeah. And that's why it's so uncomfortable
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
we don't want to be dealing with pain.
Hmm.
But as Rana says, it's something that we will all experience at some point.
Hmm.
And if we think, no, that's not for me, not, it's like most things. When we think it's not for us, it's because we are perhaps repressing it or hiding it, not being
Hmm.
aware of it.
Hmm.
It's interesting because Ishana also suggests that we can look at shame like on three different levels. On
Okay.
the level of the self, of the person themselves, on the level of shame related to the family, and the level of shame related to society. So we start with the one like of the self. I can bring feelings of shame within from my past, from things that happened in the past, that I have wounds that are still open, from
Hmm.
things that I am ashamed that I did. And this is really interesting because they were, why are you ashamed that you did what you did? Whatever
Mhm.
act I did, it solely represents my state of evolution, our still primitive state. I
Yeah.
think some of the times is this, like you put it so eloquently, but I was thinking it's like we think we are angels when we are still like dragging ourselves through the swamp.
That's good.
We have a misconception of where we are on our level of evolution. Like we believe our story, we believe the
Mhm.
bubble that we created, and this is trying to maintain that is really stressful. So if we've committed a behavior, an act that we are ashamed of for whatever reason,
Mhm.
then we have to start with, why am I ashamed of this? Because it shows who I really am,
Yeah.
because what I do comes from within.
Yes.
If I was already at the level of Jesus, I wouldn't have done it. But
Mhm.
because I'm not there yet, I still do these things. And I
Mhm.
think it's just having that, starting to wake up to saying, like people go like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. Oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't done it. So yeah, but you did. Oh, I did. Uh, why do I wish I hadn't done it? Because I wish I was already past this
Yes.
temptation. I
Yeah.
wish that I could, that wasn't, that was a non-issue for me now. But still I'm caught up with it. That just shows that this is something that is still in me, and we are very close still to the beginning of our evolution. So our
Yeah.
primitive impulses are still very present in us, but we don't acknowledge them. And if we don't acknowledge them, then they catch us by surprise by the way we
Mhm.
act.
Yeah.
So
So,
what's
so
yeah, sorry, yeah.
no, no, I'm just thinking, and this is impromptu thought
Yeah,
here,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, uh, because we talked about the primitive self, right?
Mm,
And the angelic self. This is future
mm,
state, and the future state in the evolutionary path of an immortal spirit,
mm.
right? Now, spiritism, and both of us do believe in spiritism. We are spiritists, right? And spiritism brings us the notion that the world that we live, like our spirit, also goes through some evolutions, right? And
Mhm,
those evolutions, and those are from an academic purposes, a lower level, a higher level, whatever. But
mm,
from a world perspective, we're talking about the primitive world, the world of trials and expiations, the world of regeneration, so on and so
mm.
forth. And I keep seeing that if you give me just a second here,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
look at the primitive world as it regards to shame, which puts us in more as you would see, right? Let's say a lioness kills. A lioness is not ashamed of killing,
Mhm,
right? Because it is in its evolutionary stage as an animal, it's doing the killing not for perverse reasons, but for survival, right?
yeah.
Self protection. Um, as we evolve in humankind, our primitive self perhaps did not have a sense of shame because we're just surviving. As
Mhm,
we evolve, and we're talking about the moral evolution, as we evolve spiritually, now we coming through this, but I should be better, but I'm not. Am I ashamed from those the self that you start saying, like the inner conflicts or the external circumstances that labels all of us, this external world that tries or attempts to label who we are, how we should be, and then of course in a different path at a different world when we're much more evolved, there will be no shame
mhm.
because, like you said, Joanne is very inclusive. In that at that point, we would be reading from Joanna. We're all good because we are self-aware and we know the level of immaturity we are, and we love ourselves nevertheless. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that's great, Marcia. I think that was a really good bringing that aspect of it, because
Mhm.
I think it's really crucial to our understanding is
Mhm.
this sense of evolution in one direction. We're
Yeah.
always getting better and better, and
Yes.
that recognizing where we are on that point of evolution, and even where our planet is in terms of the world and where we are according to how the spirits explained to Alan Kardec in the Spirits book back in the
Yes.
19th century. That is really helpful for us to locate ourselves and to bring down those expectations from a fantasy level to a more realistic level. And I think that that recognizing that what are the impulses that we still have
Mhm.
rather than hiding them,
Yes.
then is say, okay, let's say I can easily fall into this temptation, whatever the temptation. Let's say I recognize that in me is, I have that. If I recognize that and I pay attention to it, I can work with it.
Yeah.
So I say this kind of place does not suit me, because I know that I can be tempted here, because I
Yeah.
know I still have temptations in this area, whatever. So rather than negating it, I am working with it and bringing it with me and accepting that this is part of me that
Mhm.
slowly will be transformed, because everything is transformed and progress is inevitable, and we are all destined to perfection.
Yes.
So we're going through these struggles and these how can I say, these conflicts and everything. It's like we are it's going through the molding process for our spirit, if you like.
Mhm.
And even if you take like then shame, like talking in terms of evolution, the establishment of moral codes or rules for, let's say, the tribe or the community,
Mhm.
the use of shame could control the population. Says we want our tribe, our community to behave in such a way that we
Mhm.
think is the way that is suitable or advantageous or healthy for our group. And if you behave outside that, you will be excluded. And in a society where if you're excluded, you might not have the means to survive on your own. It's a big
Yes.
thing.
And we do need, right? We as social animals, we must feel a sense of belonging,
Yeah.
right? It's a very strong driver to our behaviors. This sense of I belong to this family, I belong to this clan, this neighborhood, this soccer club or football club for the British, right?
Yeah.
Whatever is the clique, the community, the tribe, the clan. And so from that perspective, I can see that shame can be a very powerful antidote, if you will, to non-acceptable behaviors for that group.
Yeah. And I think that we need to consider that all of us, in our process of evolution, either have
Mhm.
witnessed people being excluded or we have
Yeah.
been excluded ourselves. So there is a
Mhm.
real fear that can be attached to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although the way we live in Western society is different in terms of the how we depend on the group, and that there is space for differences and to grow and develop. So one of the things that Joanna de Angelis also suggests is like in the past, like in the medieval times, she talks about medieval times, everything that was unknown to the church was considered a sin. So the
Yes.
sin was everything that was like, we don't understand this, so it's a sin. It's not allowed. It's not good.
It's
And
actually like I see in my mind's eye, it goes into little jars with colors, right?
yeah,
So everything has to be a different color. But if it doesn't belong, if it's a different shade, you throw out. Uh, and of course, the notion of heresy or heretical beliefs and behaviors through the Inquisition in that case
mm,
led to not just people to conform, but conform by horror, right?
Mm.
By terrible, terrible aspects of the church at the time. We're talking about Catholic Church or Christian Church at the time, right? Where there would be torture, would be terrible, terrible deaths if and only if you did not conform to a given. So I love that Joanna de Angelis brings that because it's very fresh still in our memory. Right?
Yeah, and I would say, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
around the globe today, and we see it even in the UK in some immigrant populations, you
Mm-hmm.
have control of individuals through the family and their communities, through what they consider the honor.
Mm-hmm.
And we have here sometimes honor killings if the person
Mm-hmm.
doesn't conform to what that family or that community expect.
Yeah.
They would prefer to remove the person by murdering them than for them to continue to be alive, because them being alive is a continuous source of shame to that family or that community. That's really, really powerful. And that happens today
Oh
in
wow.
2024
Yeah.
in the UK,
That's
in Europe. And
yeah.
for us, it's quite shocking sometimes because we're coming like more of a Western sort of upbringing. So how can they behave in this way? And you have to really realize how very strong this the power of
Mm-hmm.
shame is in situations like this, and
Mm-hmm.
that this how it was, for
Mm-hmm.
us, going back history a little bit. So that is just keeping it alive, and I think it's no disrespect to those communities, but it's just a reminder that it's very close, you know and it's still on the earth. And we were talking earlier, we're talking like moral standards, and
Mm-hmm.
talking about like being an unmarried mother in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
before the war, that you'd be shameful, you would be kicked out of your home, you would be
Mm-hmm.
excluded from your family, you'd be excluded from your community, your child would be removed. You, the woman, yeah, okay, now be a bit feminist. Okay, but yeah, the woman was, this thing of the temptress, the prostitute, the person who brings down our community. The person was very shamed. But you take it nowadays, here in London, only about 30% of couples who have children are married.
Yeah.
Every, it's the changed customs. There is reason why these moral standards were there, and in
Mm-hmm.
a way, even to protect, children born out of marriage would be, how would they bring them up? They couldn't work, and there's all the economic and social reasons for it. I'm not saying that there wasn't a reason behind the establishment
Mm-hmm.
of, but the consequences were very hard, very painful. So
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine that all of us as spirits now incarnated, we bring these wounds quite, recent, because it's within living memory, isn't it? So
Mm-hmm.
we have to be kind also and considerate, thinking, if people from other generations are thinking in a very rigid way still, it's not easy to look at the issues of shame and to break away. It's
Yeah. Joanna calls those atavistic inheritance, right? So
mm,
things that we are not even aware, but are part of a remote past. And by remote, we're talking maybe previous incarnations. And it's part, I think Freud speaks of it as your personal unconscious, as
mm,
if it's within this one lifetime. And of course, Jung references to it as part of this concept of collective unconscious. Regardless of that, I'd like to believe in that um, the sense of shame, current or earlier, still plagues us,
mm,
even as modern society, and we're talking about modern Western society, UK, the US, etc. Um, there's a much more leniency in the same behaviors, but it still plagues us, and I think that's what's important for us to be aware. Be aware of how you judge the other, right? How
mm,
do you see let's say in the theme of the unmarried mother, but how do you see a young woman and how a young woman dresses today, right?
Mm.
What are the things that we project into that that is really a reflection of this past?
And it's really interesting because Joanna brings one of the things that is most linked to shame and thinking about self shame, so being
Yeah.
ashamed of yourself. She links the word intolerance.
Yes. Yes.
So, quite often, she says, people who are intolerant of the behaviors of others in society carry the shame of a hidden similar behavior within the
Yeah.
projection, isn't it?
Yes.
So, if you are feeling, or if I'm feeling very intolerant towards the behavior of others in some regards, I need to stop and think, is that in me as well?
Yeah.
Why is it
and,
so?
and and the problem is that it's repressed, right? it's
Mm,
a it's something that uh most likely resides in our shadow, our repressed memory, repressed shame. But I love that you bring that in this discussion, right? Let's be very, from a self-awareness perspective, let's pay attention. How
mm,
open am I to what I call the other? And what I mean by that is the other, because I don't recognize within myself, right? So
mm,
the other type of behavior, the other type of values, and so on and so forth. If I am not open to that, why not?
mm,
And do I present a level of intolerance that is quite rigid? And the stronger that intolerance may be, maybe this is something that I have repressed for myself, which at the end of this whole circle is a source of pain.
mm.
Hidden as it may be, it's a source of pain.
Yeah, and I think that when you start to recognize your pain,
Hmm.
whenever you feel that pang and you go like, aha, what's that? Where's that
Yes,
coming from? It's almost like you get a piece of wool and you start pulling it and pulling it and pulling, and
yeah,
have that curiosity and not
yeah,
have fear to say what's coming, where's this coming from? What's at the end of this? There is some considerations that Shona brings also in this chapter around shame that is caused to a child by the upbringing the parents provide, where the
yeah,
parents are very cruel, where they don't acknowledge the presence of the child, they don't nurture them with love and support, and they say things, you shouldn't have been born, you're a waste of space, all these kind of sort of negativities. We don't need to be repeating them here. And then she's talking about that a person that goes through that kind of environment in their childhood, in your childhood, especially in the first 5 years, you
yeah,
accept everything your parents give you as the truth in which you
yes,
will build. So
yeah.
if they're telling you that you're worthless, you're starting off your journey with this belief that you're worthless. So you have,
It's an imprint, right?
yeah,
And this is an imprint in how you
just
define
take it
yourself.
on. You
Yeah,
take it on because
yeah.
you don't stop and think, oh, is this right or is this wrong? You just absorb everything. That's how you learn as a child. So you're just
Hmm.
absorbing everything, and these feelings like you are worthless. So okay, so you go into the world thinking, yeah, I'm worthless. My parents
Yeah,
told me that day after day, and this is who I am. And so it's really interesting to see, because she says from that dreadful experience, one, nobody goes through an experience like that just randomly. Sometimes this is an experience that we've requested to
hmm,
advance our evolution. Sometimes this
yeah,
is an experience that is the result of what we've done
mm,
previously. So we might have been that abusive parent in a previous life
yeah,
or something,
yeah.
and now we come to experience what it's to be on the receiving end of it. So
Interesting. Yeah, yeah,
it's a painful lesson. You
yeah,
receive that. And she said, then going through adolescence, it says sometimes that child will escape to their room, to their fantasy world, because the world that's been offered by the parents is too a painful world. And so by escaping from reality, if you like, going forwards, people can have like two ways. It said some people, if they build a strong enough ego, as they grow older and become adults, they can
mm,
realize that was not okay.
yeah,
I have these feelings of shame that were instilled in me in my childhood, but I want to change this, I want to do therapy, I want to,
Mhm.
so you have that mature way of thinking, this is not okay, let's deal with this and get better. Or if not, if the ego is not strong enough, the person could end up with a mental illness or
Mhm.
a nervous crisis, as she says, because if it's too overwhelming for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
The important thing to say is, like, as cruel or hard or suffering or painful as anything is, nothing lasts forever, and there's always a new morning, a new beginning, and the opportunity to grow from it. So
Mhm.
I think, like, just talking in case of anybody out there that's listening in and feeling despair in any way, do not feel despair. Think, okay, this is your experience. Let's start the journey of healing now, and look for the therapies that will support you, what works for you. But the most important thing, which I bring now, that she says, which is the solution to all of these things, is
Mhm.
love.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
start with self love, to
Mhm.
say, I accept myself, I love myself, I am God's child, I am a being of light. I have the future ahead of me. And just working on your self love to begin, so that you can transform those experiences and grow out of them, move out of the pain. Because when you are in a state of self shame, like you're
Mhm.
ashamed to be yourself every day, every moment you're ashamed, you're in a constant state of pain.
Yes.
And that generates behaviors which is, say, like self punishment, self recrimination. Because then you do say, yeah, but I don't deserve to be happy, I don't deserve to be loved, I don't deserve to have a good job, I don't deserve because I have been brought up to be
And-
ashamed of myself.
Yeah. And I see, right, self-esteem
Mm-hmm.
being impacted, that sense of non-deserving, as you mentioned, I am not worthy of this or that. Then we have the self-sabotage, and many times it is actually unconscious. You
Mm-hmm.
sabotage yourself from having a healthy family life, a healthy relationship with your partner. You don't have you sabotage maybe your professional life, your endeavors, whatever they may be, your desires to grow and learn. And I think this is what's important to me. It speaks volumes to me is to understand. It, it, I don't even know that I have an impacted um, self-esteem, a low self-esteem because of this. So this is the end result of this self-awareness. But if I see behaviors that time and time again show that self-sabotage, maybe it's time, as you mentioned before, Anne, time to stop, to observe, to inquire. What is it? What was behind this? Is it fear, right? Is it fear of failing? Is it fear of being what I once was? What is it that is really there? And let's try to use the mechanism, the beautiful mechanism of learning, if we don't know yet, to love ourselves, to forgive ourselves, to accept ourselves, to tolerate ourselves in all the shades, right? Because as we know, in this very world of dualities, what I am today, I am not, right? We do know in Joanna de Angelis in her psychological series, she brings up, I think is the second book, right? Integral Human Being. She brings that notion that Carl Gustav Jung also brings, which is we are here on a journey toward individuation, integration. And individuation means one, not dual, right? The
Mm-hmm.
duality that we have. So that integration, that non-duality of our future simply means that we are going to have to accept all the nuanced approach and the conflicting feelings and emotions that we still bring in us because we're not there yet, right? We are in a evolutionary path, but this marathon is quite long. Right? We're far from getting to the end of the marathon.
Yeah. No, and that is so true. And just thinking about, the love, like say, when we are able to accept ourselves, as we say in English, warts and all,
Yeah, yeah,
and to love ourselves, to understand, our place in creation, if you like, in the universe, in God's um, creation, or the source creation, or whatever you want to call it. But also then that allows us to, once we're able to do that, to look at our parents or those who might have inflicted the shame on us, no longer with hatred or resentment, but with the understanding that they too are our brothers and sisters on a pathway,
yeah,
and that their choices are coming from a place of fear, of ignorance, of lack of enlightenment, if you like. And then we are able to learn to love them.
mhm,
But it starts with us, because then as we go, as we learn to love ourselves, then we can learn to accept and be tolerant of the shortcomings of others, because we learn to be so, like saying, when I say to accepting our shortcomings, doesn't mean that then we become complacent or lazy and we do nothing about it, but we recognize that we still have that in us,
yeah,
that we still have those impulses, that
yeah,
we still have those behaviors, and
yeah.
but
And
we no
and without
longer.
self, yeah. And sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
without self-love, right? And self-compassion, self-forgiveness, we we can say, I'm a loving person. I love you, right? I love you, Anne. I have so much love for you. I don't have for me, but and the minute you start to portray or reflect what I don't love about myself, I project into you intolerance, right? A judgment and all sorts of things. So at the end of the day, without self love, we are on a journey of self isolation,
Mhm.
self hatred in many cases, and in a pathological means, it can lead to depression and many other very difficult states to be.
And also, I just thinking about the beauty of it, as we, I think it's like, I see it in a mature way. Of course, I'm a mature woman now, and
Yeah.
it's like, you don't, like when you're younger, you want to hide. You've done something
Mm.
wrong. You've dropped the cookie jar and it broke, and you try to hide it in the bin, and the mum goes like, "Where's the cookie jar gone? I don't know. Disappeared." This kind of things, which is kind of like a childish behavior, but
Yeah.
we reflect that sometimes we behave in the same way, just with different words in our adult life. We've done a bad piece of work at work, and we hide it, and we pretend it wasn't us, but
Yeah.
then we are ashamed because we know that that's not correct to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we are imposing this suffering on ourselves. I have to share here, because thinking about work, I don't know if I shared this story before, but yeah, it was once an interesting experience. We had a very severe boss, and
Yeah.
my colleague and I, we made a mistake
Uh,
uh, at work, and we were like really terrified. And we went there to say, "Look, I'm so really sorry, we've made this mistake." As soon as we identified it, we went there to say what our mistake was, and we had no idea
uh-huh.
to make it good.
Uh-huh. Uh,
Uh, and he was there, head down, signing papers, and we're like trembling there. Oh my gosh, we've done this real big mistake, and now we don't even know what to do. And he looks up to us, says, I'm glad you made a mistake." And we were like, "What?"
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
He said, "Only people who are working make mistakes. The people who are not doing any work don't ever make
Yeah.
a mistake because they're not doing the work."
Yeah. This brings me to the notion, and we're now going to politics, right? Politicians during elections, they bring forth their best self, the best
Mhm.
image, and a lot of politicians live a life of scrubbing if they made mistakes, trying at least to scrub their past mistakes because they need to bring this really polished, unblemished view of themselves. And to me, and this is my personal view, I always think the politician that has the worst past, that had all mistakes, are the ones that understand what it takes to redeem themselves, right?
Mm.
And this is, again, this is my personal view, but maybe we can reflect upon that, right?
Mm.
Like this boss that you had, good. I'm glad because you made a mistake. That means that you're trying, that you're
Yeah.
not uh, imprisoned in the area of comfort to only do what you already done because you know that you can do it and you don't try, you don't risk, you don't grow, you don't stretch.
Mm. Yeah. It's so interesting, and the thinking about, we will always make mistakes. You can't avoid all mistakes. We try to
Uh-huh.
control the situation, and
Yeah,
it's we will make mistakes. And it
yeah,
just coming to my mind, just that story of Jesus and the woman who was going to be stoned to death for
yeah,
committing a
yeah,
sin according to their times. And then everybody left when he challenged them. Everybody left, and and she was saying, "Well, what are you going to do with me?" He says, "Well, where are the people who condemn you? Go and sin no more." That word, those words, which is
yeah,
"go and sin no more." That's we need to listen to that for ourselves,
yeah, yeah,
to forgive ourselves and say, "Look, okay, we made a mistake. Go, but don't repeat the same mistake. Try to learn from it."
yeah, yeah.
And just thinking like, we as we transform ourselves, as we become more loving beings, more, I would say, psychologically mature beings, we transform our whole community.
Yes, yes.
We want others to behave better, but the only way we're going to achieve that really is if we start to behave better, because then we can be, have that trigger effect, that domino effect in our community.
It's truly the real notion of influencing others
Mm,
by our actions versus influencing others by a carefully curated message that is marketed.
mm,
That it's too polished. Let's influence by our being better, right? By trying to be better, by
yeah.
recognizing our mistakes, by accepting who we are, and accepting in turn that the loving and tolerant view of who we think of ourselves is easily now translated into how I relate to others. And I think that's the beautiful message about this discussion on shame.
I would say we end up with saying, don't be ashamed to
Yes.
recognize shame,
Yes, yes, I love it.
to the light and transform it.
Yeah. So I think those are really beautiful words. I think we should take this opportunity to close our call today with that. And I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, Anne, for being
Oh,
with us. Thank you for being with us in this podcast. And we hope to see you next time. Bye, everyone.
bye.